I sat in my parked car for almost 20 minutes just staring at my phone. There it was, another message from Sarah, cold accusatory and filled with words I'd never typed. Don't lie to me, Thomas. I saw what you sent her, but I didn't send anything. I hadn't even spoken to another woman in weeks outside of work. At first I thought maybe someone hacked my number, or maybe there was some weird glitch. But then more messages showed up, screenshots, forwarded threads, all making it look like I was having some kind of secret affair. I could see it in her eyes the last time we spoke. Doubt, pain, a kind of distance that wasn't there, before I kept asking myself the same question. What if my own wife really believes I'm cheating and I can't prove I'm not? That's when I stopped reacting and I started investigating. I hired a private investigator the next morning. What he found, it changed everything. I thought I knew about trust and family. Before I share what happened, I need you to really ask yourself, what would you do if someone was sabotaging your marriage from the inside without ever leaving a trace? This is my story, and it's not what you think. Stay with me. I've been married to Sarah for 6 years. She's smart, grounded, and fiercely loyal. At least she always used to be. We met in college, stayed together through thick and thin, and built a life in Portland where I work as an architect. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real solid. Or so I thought. The cracks didn't start showing overnight. It began with little things missed, calls, strange tension at dinner, the way she started locking her phone more often. At first, I blamed work stress. Sarah's a nurse, and with everything going on in the world, I figured maybe she just needed space. But then the comments started, I just don't know if I can trust you anymore. Who's really been texting you after midnight, Thomas? At first, I laughed it off, then I stopped laughing. She showed me screenshots, full message threads, stuff I'd supposedly sent, flirty lines, hotel invites, photos that made my stomach turn. None of it was from me, and yet it was all tied to my name, my contact, my number. It didn't make sense. I even showed her my phone blank clean. No trace of those conversations, but she just shook her head like I was gaslighting her. The pain in her eyes hurt worse than the accusations. Sarah wasn't just upset. She looked betrayed, and she was starting to pull away. The worst part, I couldn't blame her. If I saw those messages from her, I'd question everything too. Still, something didn't sit right. The timing, the sudden volume of evidence. The fact that her trust flipped so fast, almost like it was planted. That's when another piece clicked, her mother, Judith. Now, Judith had always been polite, civil on the surface, but cold, calculating. The kind of woman who always found a way to smile while subtly cutting you down. She never liked me. She'd once told Sarah loud enough for me to hear, Thomas is a good man, just not your kind of man. I brushed it off at the time. But looking back, I remembered all the little moments, Judith accidentally deleting my number from Sarah's phone during a family trip. Judith insisting Sarah use her tablet to check something just before dinner. Judith constantly comparing me to Sarah's old boyfriend, some stockbroker who drove a Tesla and called her babe like he owned her. That's when it hit me. What if this wasn't a glitch or a hack or even Sarah? What if someone close, too close, was twisting things from behind the curtain? I wasn't about to accuse anyone without proof. So I made a quiet decision. No more guessing. No more emotional outbursts. No more begging Sarah to believe me. I needed the truth. That's when I made the call. I found a private investigator named Grant who specialized in digital forensics and discreet surveillance. I told him everything. Every message, every suspicion, every strange interaction with Judith. He didn't flinch. I've seen worse, he said. If someone's tampering with devices or impersonating you through contact swaps, we'll know. I gave him Sarah's number, Judith's mine, and a few device access points I could legally provide. Then I waited. That wait was the longest 4 days of my life. But what he found next, it shattered everything. And yet somehow it also gave me back everything I thought I'd lost. Let me tell you what he uncovered. It was late Thursday afternoon when Grant called. His voice was calm, but I could tell something was off. We've confirmed manipulation, he said. Your wife's phone wasn't hacked, but her contact list was altered and the messages, they were created locally. I didn't fully understand at first. He explained someone had physically accessed Sarah's phone, reassigned contact names, and used third-party apps to stage fake conversations. One example, a number saved as Anna from work, was actually a burner line registered just weeks ago. The messages Sarah believed came from me. They were from that number. Same with the flirty photos. Same with the call history. They weren't mine. They were staged, but here's the twist. None of it could have been done remotely. Whoever set this up had to have held Sarah's phone in their hands, had to know her passcode, had to be close. That's when Grant showed me a screen grab from Sarah's cloud backup, a login from an unknown IP, one that matched Judith's home Wi-Fi. I felt the air leave my lungs. She did it, I said almost to myself. Grant paused. There's more, he said. We installed a cam outside your mother-in-law's front hallway, just motion activated yesterday while you were out. She stopped by your place 5 minutes alone in the kitchen. That's where Sarah usually charges her phone, right? I nodded slowly. We have her on video picking up the phone, entering a code, and look here, typing something. We can't see the screen itself, but based on timestamps, it matches exactly with the new batch of messages that showed up on Sarah's phone last night. I was silent. I felt sick. It wasn't just sabotage, it was betrayal, calculated, deliberate, and it wasn't just aimed at me. Judith had used her own daughter's trust, her love, as a weapon. Why, I didn't have to ask. Deep down, I already knew she never thought I was good enough. Never forgave me for taking Sarah away from the world she wanted her daughter to live in wealth. Prestige, control. Sarah's ex was everything Judith admired. High-paying job, country club status. Predictable me. I build homes, not portfolios. And that made me disposable in her eyes. I sat there in the dark, holding my phone, watching the grainy footage loop on my screen. Judith, standing in my kitchen, hands on Sarah's phone. Smiling, I felt the anger rise. But I didn't let it take me over, because now I had what I needed. Proof, not guesses, not hunches, not desperation, evidence. Still, I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I did. This wasn't just about confronting Judith. It was about restoring trust. And that meant showing Sarah the truth in a way she couldn't ignore without turning it into war. I thought about blasting the video on a group text. Thought about showing up to Judith's house and demanding an apology, but none of that would fix what was broken. So I waited, planned. I asked Grant for one more favor. Can you help me set up a meeting? Just us, Sarah and Judith. He smiled through the phone. That's why I love this job, he said. Let's make it count. And just like that, the revenge wasn't rage, it was clarity. Now it was time to bring everything into the light. Saturday came faster than I expected. I'd arranged dinner at our place. Sarah thought it was just a casual evening, me trying to make peace. Judith, of course, showed up right on time. Hair perfect, smile, polished, holding a pie she didn't bake. Thought I'd bring dessert, she said. Fake warmth as always. I played along, I had to. We sat down at the table like some normal family, pushing pasta around our plates, making small talk about nothing. But my stomach was churning. Sarah looked exhausted. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, or maybe just lost. Finally, I looked at her and said, I invited someone else too. That's when Grant stepped into the room. Calm, professional, holding a discreet manila folder in one hand. Sarah blinked. Judith's face dropped for half a second, then snapped back into her smile. Oh, is this one of your architect friends, Thomas? She said it sweetly. Dismissively, I didn't answer. Grant set the folder on the table and opened it. Mrs. Bennett, he began. I'm a licensed private investigator. I was hired to look into a series of messages that have affected your marriage silence. Sarah looked confused. Judith tilted her head. Messages, Grant continued. He walked Sarah through everything. The altered contacts, the burner number, the remote logins traced to Judith's Wi-Fi, and finally the security footage. He slid over a tablet, pressed play, and there it was. Judith alone in our kitchen holding Sarah's phone. The footage was silent, but the timestamps didn't lie. Judith stared at the screen. Her mouth went dry. Sarah sat frozen. Mom, she whispered. Judith blinked. For once she had no script, no witty comeback, no ready excuse. She started. Grant. Cut in firm but polite. Judith. This isn't about interpretation. It's digital proof, time-coded, and we verified everything with cloud backups. I leaned forward, my voice low. You tried to make my wife think I was cheating. You went into her phone. You faked conversations. You used her trust to hurt us both. Judith's eyes darted between us. She opened her mouth again, closed it, then finally said the words, "I didn't think you were right for her. She had a future, one with options. You're comfortable, but not exceptional." Sarah's face crumpled. "All this because you didn't like who I married?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because you thought he wasn't enough." Judith tried to justify herself, said she was protecting Sarah, that she thought I'd eventually fail and this would just speed things up. But it was too late. The damage had been done. And now there was no going back to what we had. Before I stood up, not angry, just clear. "You're not going to prison, Judith. But from now on, there are rules. You don't touch our devices. You don't visit unannounced. You go to family counseling if you ever want to be part of our lives again." Judith looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. And Sarah. She didn't say much after that. She just stood, walked over to me, and took my hand. Not everything was fixed in that moment, but something shifted. A weight lifted. For the first time in weeks, she looked at me like she remembered who I really was. We didn't say "I forgive you" or "I'm sorry." We just stood there silent, and that silence said everything. I'll be honest, I didn't feel triumphant after that night. There was no dramatic walkout, no shouting match, just emptiness. The kind that follows betrayal, too deep for words. But I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for closure. And for Sarah and me, that meant rebuilding trust on purpose. The next morning, we sat across from each other in the kitchen. Same table. Different air. Sarah looked at me, eyes tired but open. I feel like I let her control everything she said. I didn't question it, I just believed her. Believed what I saw on a screen more than what I've lived with you for 6 years. I didn't interrupt, I let her speak. Because this wasn't about vindication, it was about reconnecting without guilt, tripping without revenge. So I just said, she knew where to hit, and she didn't care who it hurt. Sarah nodded slowly, but I do. That's when we started making real decisions. We didn't want to cut Judith out completely. She was still Sarah's mom, but this wasn't going to be swept under the rug with a fake apology and a slice of store-bought pie. We set 3 conditions. 1, Judith had to attend family counseling for at least 6 months before seeing us unsupervised. 2, she would never again have access to our devices, no shared passwords, no phones left alone. 3, any future time with our potential children, when that day comes, would be earned, not expected. Sarah delivered the terms herself. Calm, clear. Judith resisted, of course. Tried to downplay it, said we were overreacting. But when Sarah didn't flinch, Judith caved. Maybe it was the shock of losing control. Maybe she realized we weren't bluffing. Either way, she agreed. That was the first time I'd seen Sarah choose us, not just out of love, but out of principle. It mattered. But that wasn't the only plan I had in motion. I asked Grant to help me set up digital safeguards on every account, every device. We created new logins, added 2-factor authentication, and backed everything up on private encrypted servers. Sarah changed her passcodes. We reviewed every app on her phone. Deleted anything that didn't come from verified sources. It was more than cybersecurity. It was symbolic. For the first time in months, we were doing things together, actively protecting what we built, instead of defending it from shadows. That week, we also started couples therapy. Not because our marriage was broken beyond repair, but because we wanted it stronger than before. We talked about communication, about how fast trust can be weaponized when outside voices creep in. We unpacked our different triggers, mine rooted in needing logic and order, hers in fearing abandonment. There were tears, there were long silences, but there was progress. One night after a session, Sarah said, "I don't think I ever saw how much she wanted me to be someone else." Not for me, for her, I just said, "And I've only ever wanted you to be yourself." She smiled, a real one this time. No defense behind it. We still had work to do, but the difference now, we were doing it together. And Judith, while she kept her distance, attended the therapy sessions, quiet, uncomfortable, but present. We didn't need her approval anymore. And maybe that's why it finally meant something when she stopped trying to offer it. She was no longer a gatekeeper between us. She was just someone learning to stay in her lane. And for us, that was enough, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming peace. On our terms, with boundaries, with intention, and that's a kind of justice that sticks. 2 weeks after the confrontation, we invited Judith to join one of our therapy sessions. Not as a formality, not for forgiveness, but to finally lay everything bare with a professional in the room. It was a cold Wednesday morning, rain tapping against the windows. Judith sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, arms folded like armor. Sarah and I sat side by side, close but not clinging. The therapist asked a simple question. Judith, what did you hope to achieve by creating those messages? Judith hesitated, then she said the quiet part out loud. I wanted her to see what I saw, that this marriage was holding her back. Sarah stared at her, not with anger but sadness. You didn't just sabotage Thomas, she said. You sabotaged me. You made me question the one person who's never made me feel small. Judith looked away. I didn't think you'd ever leave him. I thought maybe if you had a reason. That wasn't a reason, I said, voice calm but firm. That was a lie, and lies like that don't just go away. They leave cracks in people. The therapist nodded. What happens now depends on your willingness to repair those cracks, she told Judith. Silence again. Heavy. Then Judith said something I didn't expect. I'll go to therapy. I'll do the work. But I can't promise I'll ever fully approve. And for once, that was okay. We weren't asking for her blessing, just her respect for the space we were reclaiming. After the session, Sarah and I walked to the car in silence. Once we were inside, she turned to me. She'll never change completely, she said. I nodded. But we did. We didn't have some grand moment where the sun broke through the clouds. No perfect resolution, just clarity. Judith stayed in counseling. We kept our boundaries, and slowly life began to feel normal again. But not the old normal. A better one. Sarah started smiling more, laughing even. The late-night distance between us disappeared. We cooked dinner together again, sat on the porch and talked about future travel, maybe starting a family. But what mattered most was that we learned how to spot the cracks before they spread. One afternoon, Sarah scrolled through her phone and caught herself getting anxious. What is it? I asked. She showed me a text. Just a work group message. She smiled, then shook her head. Old habit, she said. Second-guessing everything I reached over, took her hand. You can second-guess the world, I said, but not us, not anymore. That night, we deleted all the old threads, the fake ones, the screenshots, the entire cloud folder. We didn't need to keep the evidence. Because the truth had already done its job. It saved us, and it reminded us who we are when no one's whispering in our ears. As for Judith, she's still around in a limited way. Visits are scheduled. Boundaries are posted like emotional fences we both agreed on, and she knows any slip, any control play. She's out, not out of spite, out of respect for what we rebuilt. Because survival isn't just about staying married, it's about protecting your peace and learning to spot the threat that wears a familiar face. That's what the fallout taught us. You don't always get to choose your family, but you do get to choose how close they stand. Looking back now, it's almost surreal how one person's quiet manipulations almost tore apart something it had taken years to build. But if there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's this: love without trust is a ticking time bomb. And trust isn't just about words, it's about patterns, actions, proof. If I had exploded the first time Sarah accused me, if I had screamed, blamed, defended myself without thinking, I might have lost her for good. Instead, I slowed down. I chose investigation over anger, proof over pride. It saved our marriage, it saved me. Sarah learned something too. She realized that even people who claim to love you can sometimes act out of fear, pride, or control, not genuine care. And that loving someone doesn't mean handing them the keys to your reality. It means protecting your peace even from the people you thought were safest. For us, survival didn't look like a grand romantic gesture. It looked like slow mornings with coffee and laughter. It looked like password changes and therapy appointments. It looked like fewer doubts and more honest conversations. Today, Sarah and I are stronger, not because we forgot what happened, but because we faced it together. And Judith, she's learning slowly. Maybe she never changes completely. Maybe she never fully understands what she did. But that's not our responsibility to fix anymore. Our responsibility is to each other. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: never let someone else's fears rewrite your truth. And if you feel that distance creeping in those doubts that weren't there before, pause, investigate, protect your peace. You deserve a love that doesn't need defending against the people around you, a love that stands even when tested. What about you? If you discovered someone close was secretly poisoning your relationship, would you confront them? Or walk away? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story hit close to home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder. You're stronger than the betrayal. You're stronger than the lies. You're stronger than you think. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next story.